And welcome back to the Schooner Pod. I'm your host, Bobby Howard, here with another just kind of casual Sunday edition of the Schooner Pod. With me today, as always, we got Ty, we got Jameson. We're here to talk a little bit of NFL draft, a little bit of some salacious rumors we've been hearing, around the internet, just because they're fun. Those are fun, but overall, should be a pretty quick pod. Let's just get it started with the draft. What do you say, guys?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so overall, probably not the most successful draft. Once again, no Sooners drafted in the first round or the second. So that's kind of a bummer, especially going into this season, expecting what this draft class could have been. But overall, 7 guys drafted, not too bad. Nick Bonito, Brian Asamoah, Perion Winfrey, Delaren Turner-Yell, who gets a game ball, I might say. Definitely gets the game ball for the draft. Mike Woods, Isaiah Thomas, and Marquise Hayes. We got three. The craziest thing to me, 3 players to the Browns. So I don't know where to start on this. Jameson, your thoughts on the draft overall, and I don't know what's your big takeaway, I guess, from the draft.
Yeah, I think we really need to talk about the Browns thing later, but my biggest takeaway is this is a really disappointing draft because coming into this season a couple years ago and even like before the season, we thought we could possibly have, the first overall pick in the draft of Spencer Rattler. Jaden Hazelwood was talking about, could he be a wide receiver that could break out? And then Nick Bonito was getting some first round draft, grades, before the season. It almost went last year. So it's like, all in all, we got kind of lucky. We got a second round pick, the last pick in the second round being Nick Bonito. But other than that, our offensive linemen went really low. Like Marquise Hayes barely made it in the 7th round. Tyrese Robinson obviously didn't get drafted. I think this was a pretty weak draft for us, even though we have some numbers. And it's kind of a shame.
Agreed. A lot of lost potential, especially with guys like Bonito, Winfrey. But yeah. Ty, your thoughts on it all?
Yeah, you almost have to wonder how, the storylines are impacting that and perceptions. And obviously this can continue to go as every other OU podcast. But, maybe even you have to wonder about people's draft stocks maybe not being great because of poor sort of end of the season performance, maybe because people that weren't them were checked out. So I think it's really, with the NFL draft, as we all know, it's up to you as a player to sort of make your mark. Once you get to the league, college isn't the best indicator, but I think, it is disappointing because there's money left on the table there for these guys.
Yeah, no, and absolutely, it's a bummer for guys like Bonito, Asamoah, not really Asamoah as much, but Winfrey. And they've expressed a lot of displeasure over the previous coaching staff, especially defensive line. Grinch's strategies. So you have to wonder if that is part of it, but we don't want to be too sour grapes on this podcast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's for sure. I think a really huge disappointment that we haven't talked about yet is Kennedy Brooks not going drafted. And this was one of the best, most efficient running backs in college football. But we said it, we're like, our team's going to fall in love just with his tape, or are they going to look at the measurables and be spooked off? And it looks like the measurables did spook him off. But I'll say this. He went to probably one of the best spots he could have. Honestly, he probably had his pick of the litter. Going to Philadelphia, his quarterback is an Oklahoma guy. And he's going to a running back room that is extremely thin. I know y'all aren't the biggest, NFL people, but, that running back room, and even though they didn't run the ball much in Philadelphia, like you're going to be competing with, very non-established running backs. That Boston Scott got a lot of the carries last year due to like injury. That is a room where if he could kind of weasel his way and make the roster through training camp, you never know what could happen. And he could actually be getting some decent amount of carries. Like I can see a scenario where he's going to actually like make like his place in Philadelphia.
Yeah, no, you're right. That is a very, very good location for him because, again, it's kind of wide open there, and obviously free agency things can happen and everything. But again, if Boston Scott's your main guy, then you probably no knock on Boston Scott, but
Yeah, I mean, Boston Scott was the one who's getting a lot of the carries, but Miles Sanders is going to be their number one guy. But Miles Sanders is an extremely injury-prone running back. It seems like every single year he's going to have some kind of injury, and that's all you need as a running back, really, in this league. You just need 1 or 2 weeks where you can show out whenever you're the backup, whenever the front end starter gets hurt, and that happens in more teams than often. Like running backs get hurt all the time; they get dinged up very easily. And so plenty of run for backup running backs. So I would hope Kennedy Brooks would be in the fast track to make that team. I think he'd be a training camp guy rather than, like a draft guy. He's going to do really well whenever you can actually get him there in person. They can see him act versus NFL defenders in camp. I actually feel very confident about him in terms of, looking at guys like Mike Woods, the Brown. I don't see much room for him to get thrown to. That in terms of offense, that's really about it for playmakers that we could see on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, we just didn't have a lot of guys go to the league this year. We were thinking it was going to be Spencer Rattler as a top 5 pick, and obviously that didn't work out at all. So yeah, definitely interesting there for sure with Brooks falling. Definitely a bummer, but hey, we get him and Jalen. So definitely boosts the stock of being an Eagles OU fan for sure. Shout out my guy Patrick for that one, actually.
Yeah, and actually, I do want to jump in. Important note: I think everyone that's listening probably knows. Again, 5 out of the 7 that went to the draft were defensive players, which is sort of crazy. And I think I can say this. In fair, I don't want to turn people off to the podcast, but I think compared to you guys, I'm more of a casual fan. I think that's fair to say, and I think I can speak for people that maybe are a little more casual OU fans, maybe don't follow it as much in the off-season type thing, that it can be surprising or it can seem a bit odd when, constantly we just complain about the defense, that's ingrained in OU players, but then also you have these big names. Kennedy Brooks was our main running back, and you think, oh, well, we're a top 10, top whatever team all the time. This guy was our main running back. Most of the time he was here, he was really good. You hear his name all the time, and then he doesn't go to the draft. Can definitely be a weird situation, but it can also be a good situation. As we've seen with the draft, sometimes not sometimes you really don't have a big say in where you go if you go in the draft. Baker Mayfield comes to mind, even more notoriously. The Boz comes to mind if everyone's familiar with that story of just being like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not participating in this system. And obviously his career didn't necessarily pan out like he expected it to, but Kennedy Brooks, a little bit more say over his future. And, it's, if he's a good guy, a good player that's going to make it into the league. I know he's a good person, but if he's a good player that's going to make it into the league, he's going to be able to go to those, opportunities to impress, and he's going to be able to impress. So,
yeah. I mean, his story is definitely not over yet. I agree, Ty. There are plenty of stories where guys, go undrafted, and they still find a good home and still find a good way, and make it in the league. So. Yeah.
Let's talk about the Cleveland Browns thing before we move on, Bobby, because I think we almost forgot about that. I think it's absolutely hilarious. Whenever I was just watching the names, like I very much love the NFL draft. I go crazy about it, and I watch every single second of it, even on the Saturday, at 11 a.m. And just seeing the names come up, the OU players, when Cleveland Browns were picking, the first time whenever I saw Perion Winfrey on Saturday get picked to the Browns, I was like, oh, that's funny. This is a very vocal OU guy, and he's going to a fan base and an organization that knows they just burned a whole lot of OU fans. That's going to be kind of awkward, but okay, that's fine. It's not that big of a deal. OU's and the Browns aren't going to have a forever negative relationship. And then we see Mike Woods, and I'm like, wow, I'm kind of surprised he went drafted, but okay. And then Isaiah Thomas for the 3rd player to the Browns. Like, this got to be just they like this. Those players, right? Did they just see more Oklahoma, because I don't know, some of the scouts just watched more of our games and fell in love with a lot of our players? I really hope this is not some kind of reparation act where they're just taking their day 3 picks from Oklahoma fans because they know how much money Oklahoma fans have brought them the past couple of years, and they're about to lose a large chunk of that because of the Baker Mayfield fiasco. Like, my mind went through a bunch of like scenarios like that, even though this is a multi-million-dollar organization and business, that are they doing this just to try to keep OU fans at bay because of the money? Or they would, no way they'd be spending draft picks to do that.
Yeah, that's a good point, and it's really funny. I don't think they would be, because I think Cleveland should know firsthand that it's not really about the amount of OU players you have; it's about which ones you have. Baker, for example, because let's be honest, the Browns were popular because of Baker. When despite that, the Baltimore Ravens were literally right there with like at one point like 5 Sooners. When they had Orlando Brown, Hollywood. I'm blanking.
Andrews and Ben Powers.
Yeah, Andrews and Ben Powers. Yeah. So it's like, yeah, it's not about the numbers, it's about the guy. And they just pissed off, probably the most beloved OU player in history. So if it is a strategy, I don't think it's a working one. But it's certainly funny, because just when I thought I was out on liking Cleveland, they pulled me back in, these jerks.
Yeah, I think you guys mentioned a good point, and it's not necessarily the number of OU players, it's the specific OU players, which I think is why we're going to see a lot of OU sort of casual fandom. I guess count myself in this group of people that maybe don't necessarily watch the NFL all that much, but will tune in here and there to see OU players. And when I think about that, the first thing that comes to mind right now, not necessarily a draft move, but Hollywood Brown going to the Cardinals to play with Kyler Murray.
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
I think will be a super great, thing. And then Marquise Hayes also was a guard at OU, and he's going over there too. So I'm liking the Cardinals, I guess, as
there's no doubt
casual NFL fan.
All the Cleveland people who bought Cleveland Browns jerseys whenever Baker got drafted are legitimately moving right over to the Cardinals, because even though they were Browns transplanted fans whenever Baker got drafted, when Kyler got drafted by the Cardinals the next year, they were also kind of a little bit Cardinals fans, but they didn't have that jersey. You didn't see as many Kyler Murray jerseys walking around on a game day at OU, but sometimes you'd go there on Saturday and you'd see a decent amount of brown and orange as people wearing their Baker Mayfield jersey. Like, it's going to turn into Kyler Murray jerseys now. It really is. Even though there's a lot of, drama between the Cardinals organization and Kyler Murray in this offseason, it's very clear that if they spent a first-round pick to get Marquise Brown, like in a third-round pick, that is a huge price to get a guy that is obviously just to appease their quarterback. So there has to be some kind of amends being made between the two.
Yeah, I mean, especially with, if we're talking about, injury-prone type of guys, Hollywood has had his issues. We know that from his time at OU. If you follow the NFL, you know that as well, that he has had issue history. So you're right. That is a massive price to get a guy like Hollywood. But, honestly, this is a dynamic duo. I'm so excited to see him back. The rock, paper, scissors again. It's going to be great. Those guys were electric. And, it's nice. We get our duo back from year one of the Schooner Pod. So
yeah, and I think that it's actually going to be a really good fit from Hollywood, because in Baltimore, he was pretty much the number one receiver at the end, and they didn't use the wide receiver position not nearly as much as they could have. Lamar Jackson obviously likes tight ends more, and that's why the Ravens picked a platoon of tight ends in this draft. And plus, there was a lot of running, plenty of running. So he was the number one guy, but he wasn't getting that many carries. As a speed guy who's a deep threat, sometimes it's good not to be the number one guy. Having a guy next to you, think of Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce takes away the threat. Having DeAndre Hopkins on the other side as a possession wide receiver, where you can have Hollywood on the other side running deep routes for one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL, that's going to really help him overall. Might not be like he won't get as many targets as he was getting in Baltimore, but he's going to be making big plays and winning more games.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good fit for sure. I was going to say one last note on the draft before we move on. Mr. Irrelevant, Brock Purdy.
I almost died whenever I saw this. I thought of Ty immediately whenever I saw it.
Ty, your takes on the newest Mr. Irrelevant.
Yeah, I don't. I'm just, I'm gonna miss having him to talk about. That's for sure when it comes to Iowa State. So, it all makes sense. There really was no reason for OU to stay in the Big 12 without Brock Purdy as an opponent. So.
It's just not fun anymore. We had to leave, and that's funny.
It just came up, and they're like talking about on the broadcast before, and they're like, no Mr. Irrelevant has ever thrown a pass, and they're giving all these like statistics and stuff, and they're doing the whole like announcing thing, and they say Brock Purdy. I go, you've got to be kidding me! I was absolutely stunned that they picked Brock Purdy with the last pick in the draft. Legitimately, a guy that we've been calling a video game quarterback, who's like the definition of being
that's what happened. Is
an NPC is like irrelevant, legitimately what we were describing, and he's now Mr. Irrelevant.
That's what happened. Is all the people playing their dynasty picked all the players that they wanted, and then they just hit simulate, and one of the rosters had an open spot that they had to just auto generate an NPC to fill in. Is what occurred. So,
I mean, I'm just saying, we've been saying this for years. We've been trashed by Iowa State fans for a while on the Bird app and reviews. But you know what? You know who agreed with us? The NFL scouts, baby. They have deemed him to be Mr. Irrelevant, and by golly, we finally had the last word on it. So we'd truly love to see it.
Clearly a better football player than Kennedy Brooks now.
Yeah. But do you know what?
I didn't think about it like that.
We can't be down on Brock Purdy and Iowa State too much, because there is one more point to bring up in the draft. And I don't know what you refer to it as, but it's obviously below Mr. Irrelevant, below easy level, NPC level. And that is everyone from the University of Texas, who once again had 0 draft picks in the 2022 draft, which is just inexplicable. I think we understand, guys going into the draft this year were recruited and everything else years ago and have spent years there. And obviously it's a new staff now, so it's not necessarily indicative of the new staff's ability to develop people or lack of ability thereof. It's yet to be seen. Stumbling over my words here, but it's a major blow. They're top 5 in recruiting every single year. All the preseason hype, they're number 1 in budget, and it's like we've talked about before. Not to dance on their or dance on them while they're down. I guess, is that a saying?
They're great.
We didn't want to say dance on their graves, but
yeah, but
I'm also horrible with sayings.
It's a hard thing, and it's definitely something that needs to be brought up, because that is going to sway some recruits. Obviously, money is a big thing, and everything else, and it's a new staff, but that's a hard hit. And it's one of those things where it's like, again, old staffs, but you almost have to be trying not to develop people. Like they're so bad at developing people, and they're taking in people that are so good coming in. It's like you could almost lock them in like a shipping container for 4 years, which I think was Mike Leach's method, allegedly, at Texas Tech. And then let them out and go to the draft, and they would be good. And it's like these guys go to Texas and then just completely lose all they know is fine dining and breathing when they leave, and they go to the draft and they can't, say their name or catch a ball.
Yeah. Like this really sad part about all of this is there's multiple Texas fan excuses I've seen. And it's the number one. None of these guys are Sark's guys, so it really doesn't matter. Sark coached them. It does not matter if they did good this year and developed them to play well this season. They would have gotten drafted. And then the other one was, but we had Keontae Ingram. He got drafted in the 6th round. No, he transferred and went to USC, played horrible, and got drafted in the 6th round. No, absolutely not. But we have extinguished everything. I feel like. Does anyone else have any points about the NFL draft? You got one, Bobby?
I said it like 3 times. So here are a couple.
This is our 4th one more point.
We have had 4 one more points. This is from a thread. Michael Schwartz on Twitter compilated this, and I'm very thankful for this. These are schools who have had a draft pick, but not Texas. Wichita Baptist, Northwestern Missouri State. Let's see, Lenore-Rhine. That's just. Lenore Rhine. I don't know. It's just embarrassing. And I got to say as well, the Big 12 as a whole, absolutely embarrassing as well, including OU. 0 picks in the first round, but you have the American have several. Tulsa, for the second year in a row, got guys in the first round, but no Big 12. So if you want to see like the type of talent in the Big 12 compared to the SEC, etc., it ain't there.
Yeah, I had a list too. Some of the ones you didn't mention: Fayetteville State, Missouri State, who I think OU played, or maybe it was Montana State. I think maybe we played Missouri State one time.
At this
we
point,
never
ties
remember.
We never
played
I think
Missouri
it was.
State?
I'm pretty sure it's Missouri State.
I think we played Missouri State. Yeah,
it was
because
State.
Ty called them Montana State.
We played Montana State at one point too, or maybe regular Montana.
We played South Dakota State.
That's a different state. I thought that was like a county of.
Anyways,
yeah. It doesn't matter. The other schools, like Yale, Air Force got one in, which is like extremely difficult.
Because it was a defensive
It's a bigger
lineman.
factor than just your on the field performance. The Air Force Academy is a little bit cooler with enabling that than the other ones. But yeah, Texas, rough.
Do you have to serve immediately after you get drafted?
They changed the rules.
So they've been constantly sort of changing the rules, but the Air Force Academy generally is cool with people sort of being a reservist or doing it afterwards. Roger Staubach from Navy, famously back in the day, sort of did a similar thing, sort of played it out and did its thing. So,
okay, yeah, I think that's all we have for the draft, though. I finally have squeezed this lemon all the way through. But Jameson, the other part of this podcast, it seems like there's some shenanigans afoot with our old pal Lincoln Riley out west. What's going on? What
friend of the podcast?
Old friend of the pod, Lincoln Riley. What's going on with USC? What are these dirty son of guns up to now? What type of schemes are they planning?
That's a really good question. So here's the thing: Lincoln Riley and USC been getting a lot of bad, rap right now about trying to take, the Blendikoff winner Jordan Addison with Pittsburgh, a guy who was very public in saying that he was returning to Pittsburgh and was very passionate about their fan base and whatnot. And it came out that they're trying to pretty much pry him away, even though he's not in the portal. And everyone's like, "Oh, this is tampering, all this." But the thing is about this happens all the time. Like, think about Trey Bradford with the LSU, like with us. Just that's a story with OU. Like, LSU was very clearly tampering with us whenever he transferred us, and then he went back again. This happens all the time in football. But this is a big story because Lincoln Riley is a hot button, topic in terms of college football. And this is one of the best wide receivers in college football. So that's just a combination to make it where people are going to talk about and say, this is horrible. Oh, he's tampering. They need to be, fined for this. Problem is, there's probably no proof of it that Lincoln Riley had direct contact with him. They're probably going through back streams through, other communicators sending messages because, other people can talk to this guy. It's just not the coaching staff of USC. This happens all the time through college football, but it's happening to a guy who was so, he was so vocal about how toxic the transfer portal is and how you can cheat your way through it. And now he's just doing it right now. So it just really splatting in his face.
Yeah, it's kind of the whole, hypocritical thing, saying one thing, doing another. We've seen it countless times the past couple months. And, really, like you said, it's hard to prove. And the biggest thing is the NCAA has no regulations. That's the transfer portal, basically no regulations. So there's no consequence here. It's a total just Wild West madhouse. When you look at that, Miami basketball player who basically said, I'm entering the transfer portal and we'll leave. I'm basically going to leave Miami if I don't get more NIL money. It's a madhouse out there.
I think it's the pendulum. We've just released it, and it is obviously it takes a second to gain momentum, and we're at the point now where we're at this. We're reaching the inflection point. I don't necessarily think we're at the inflection point right now because not to diminish it, but like a guy transferring from Pitt to go play at USC like when you just look at that surface value, no NIL, no anything else, like it already kind of makes sense. You're a star player, move to a bigger school, bigger market. So maybe that would have happened back in the day, regardless of any tampering. But we're starting to see this big inflection point of sort of this no rules situation, and I think it might be neat. I think whether we want to or not, as fans, and I guess as a sport as a whole, we're going to have to, because like you said, the NCAA has really no way right now or any authority or power at all to start trying to act to change the rules at this point, even if they wanted to. So it'll be interesting, but we're reaching the Wild West, but the Wild West eventually was settled, and now there's a football stadium there, and it's one of those things where no rules in and of itself is going to eventually create rules. So it's new, it feels dirty compared to the old way of doing things, but there could be some advantages, and I'll keep myself short. But as an OU fan, one thing that comes to mind is, I'm going to get weird looks from you guys, but Baker Mayfield and the Browns, that's a very rule heavy sort of system where you can move around, and he's sort of being held hostage by the Browns in this lose-lose situation where there's a lot of money on the table for both sides. Neither side benefits really from keeping him, but both sides are sort of,
that's because he's an employee though.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. You have a different sort of situation like with college, because essentially everyone is always at a contract year in terms of the players in this current situation, because it's really just we're laundering it through a couple different things at this point. Like you said with the Miami basketball player, that's a contract year move, and he can just pull it on his own. Or it's like, Barry Switzer's NIL fund here at OU, or Texas's pancake fund for their linemen, and just different things like that. They're essentially just year by year contracts for players, and we're just having to launder it through a couple other steps, and it's all above table, wink, wink. So I think a lot of people are, ignoring the Lincoln Riley hate, try to take that out of it. I think it's a neat system. I know it's maybe get some flack from some of our friends, because as an OU fan, we're sort of a big market when it comes to college football. So it's something that's almost always going to benefit us at the cost of a smaller market, smaller school, maybe something like Tulsa or, something like that to sort of keep it local. But I think, ultimately, I think the change is probably something good, and it will create, new rules of the game that could really interestingly shape it. So there are some benefits.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not a big fan of essentially everybody having a 1-year contract with immediate free agency at any time. I don't think that's good for the game, and I don't think it's good for team cohesion. It just doesn't. I don't like it. Frankly, I'm all for player empowerment, but there has to be more done. There has to be more structure, because this is just a total mess. But the new portal rules, along with the new NIL rules together, has just kind of created this just kind of mess of a system. And my thing is, I know, people have been paying players for God knows how long. Barry Switzer was out here, with his fur coat, paying people off since before, 20 years before I was born. But at the same time, it wasn't like Switzer was going to other teams and taking them. It wasn't like this open market for everyone. And it's not just Lincoln Riley. You're totally right. He's just the one who got his hand caught in the cookie jar here. But it's a legitimate problem. Those two things paired together, it's just really frustrating, honestly. And again, player empowerment, great, good for you. We need to boost that, but also there needs to be structure. There needs to be rules. There needs to be something that it's kind of hard to say protects the schools when the schools have been benefiting off free labor for decades now. But I don't know. We don't need to have a bad system to provide reparations. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that bad system thing is the biggest key here. Let's not dog on Lincoln Riley here, because it's really easy to. The problem is it's the system. So Lincoln Riley, he's given a board game that has broken rules, and there's, loopholes to go through, and he's just utilizing what he could. Yes. Is he kind of tweaking with the rules if he is talking to a player that's not in the transfer portal? Yes, but there's nothing that we can prove to that. And there's no one, giving any kind of, reprimands to people that are doing that, because he continues to see people doing that every single year. So why not continue to do it? Because if you're not doing what everyone else is doing, if you're not cheating like everyone else is cheating, you're going to fall behind.
Yeah, and I think it's I almost like the lawlessness of it, because it is so different from pro sports where they are sort of employees, and I come back to, it almost feels more like college in that respect, because I come back to trying to compare it to any other thing, and I know it's sort of a bad comparison, but if you're a computer science major at OU and you're on the OU, some sort of computer science team, and you also code on the side and make money for that, and then decide you want to transfer to Stanford because of better job opportunities and because you're a good coder and you got recruited for their coding team or whatever, there would be no sort of penalties or whatever else incurred there, or restrictions on you. Or if you were an art student, or if you were a performing arts student and you were being compensated for performing in the ballet in Dallas, and then you're I don't know how it works, but say your sophomore year, you got an opportunity to go perform and go to school at Juilliard, you would take that, and no one would sort of bat an eye. And obviously they're not sponsored people, and there's obviously more money on the table for most football. I'm sure there are some people changing schools and good at schools and coding and stuff that are making more money, but it's really it's the amount of money, but it's also just people have this buy-in because of sports. I mean, if you boil it down to it, it's not necessarily that much different from any other business, and college sports are a business. College football is a business, and it's almost this idea of this buy-in and involvement by the fans, who I constantly argue are the most important part, because that's what generates the actual revenue that makes it relevant. Because without fans, it's just going to be IMs. So yeah. I kind of like it. It does in some ways, with my big mental gymnastics that I've spilled out. I guess you can do some gymnastics. Shout out to OU gymnastics, and find some ways to sort of justify it as being more amateur or whatever else. But I do think there are some more ways to look at it. And when you look back at college football, some of the most legendary storylines that everyone knows about and that everyone, finds interesting in hindsight, and as time goes on, almost everyone around the nation knows, like the Barry Switzer and in the 80s stories. A lot of people know the SMU stories. It's even pretty common for people that don't even follow college football to know, like the old Ole Miss stories, and the gas mask bong and all sorts of that legendary stuff.
How much did that NFT go
people
for?
Know these.
Yeah. You saw the NFT thing, right, Ty?
I saw that.
Great. It's great. Sorry.
They create content. They create interaction. They create fans. Blue Mountain State was an extremely popular show. We're devolving to the point where we're talking Blue Mountain State football, but that was an extremely popular show, obviously for a couple other reasons than just the football aspect, but it was focused on sort of that underside of college football that we all know is there at the major levels, and was extremely entertaining for people that maybe didn't necessarily even follow college football, and there is that other layer to it, and you're looking at the sport and growing the sport, that draws more people in. I don't want to dive off on a tangent of comparing other sports, but there's big cases of TV shows maybe not accurately representing the performance of the sport, but playing up the drama, and that generates new interest. So these things in the news, it's the off season, it's slow time, so we got to have something to talk about. So
this is true, and look at NBA Twitter. There's some people who legitimately, I think, get more enjoyment out of like the trade deadline than they do the actual game, and rumors and drama and all that. Like they actually care about that more than actually watching basketball. So you are completely right. It provides a lot of intrigue, but I don't know. I think there's a balance to it. But I mean, cheating, like you said, cheating has always been a part of the game. You have SMU out here tweeting gold Trans Am graphics. It's wonderful. It's just kind of a part of it. And at the end of the day, it's sports morals. Like, it's not real life morals. It's not like they're robbing banks or doing anything bad. Like, sometimes, there's obviously people doing actual crimes, but I think sometimes people equate actual crimes with, like, they accepted money and helped their parents. They helped their family, provide for their family. That doesn't make you a bad person. I mean, I guess you broke rules, but at the end of the day, it didn't harm anyone.
But rules aren't
really.
Rules aren't laws, in the sports context,
And it comes out of the whole sports morals thing, which, again, like, because you're right. Like, a lot of the movement, like, if I got a better offer, or if, from a company, then we would obviously I would consider it. That
Bobby's promoting himself. Any of you listeners want to offer Bobby a better job?
my I'm not gonna say. I almost said my LinkedIn's in the bio.
Paycom is gonna.
I'm very happy with my job. If you're listening, I'm very happy. I do not want to leave my job. I'm very happy.
You're talking about this podcast,
what I'm saying
right?
is,
this is your main job.
All I do is podcast once a week. That's my main income. Shout out to DraftKings Sportsbook. Use promo code TPPN. You can get some cool, probably. Anyways, what I'm saying is, it kind of comes back to, like, that Kevin Durant, he, did a bad thing by, moving, and, and Durant, like, compared to just moving to, like, from Apple to, I don't know, Microsoft, something like that. It's not that big of a deal. But the way sports fans look at it, the lens they look at through it with loyalty and all this other BS made up stuff, I don't know if it matters.
Did you just compare moving from the Thunder to the Warriors, moving from Apple to Microsoft?
It's not supposed to be a 1-to-1 comparison. I was just talking about trying to move companies.
Okay.
Yeah, because obviously moving from Apple to Microsoft that'd be a downgrade. Let's be honest. We just lost.
Well, no, that's what I thought. I thought you were implying not to down. I'm in a Thunder jersey currently, so I can't hate too much. But I thought you were implying that like the Thunder was like the cream of the crop when it comes to the NBA.
We sound
or not.
Hey man, but, Oklahoma. Who would want to live in California? Not me.
Sports ethics. Yeah, that is an interesting thing. Well, I guess obviously much like everyone else from California, what Durant did was immediately find a way to leave, which makes sense. But sports ethics, super interesting.
Yeah.
As an aside, Laramie Tunsil's NFT was 2.6 ETH, which is $7,400.
Wow,
that's ridiculous.
That's not that much. I honestly thought there'd be a lot more, but cool.
Yeah. So, I think we've exhausted this conversation for sure, but it's an interesting one. We could probably go all day about it.
We really haven't. I'm actively trying to have to not make this a 2-hour podcast.
We could totally do it.
We need to revisit. Let's revisit this like at another time, and really dive into it. That could be a fun little podcast series, like a history of cheating in college sports. Like, I don't know. That could be fun. Anyways, that's for, off topic stuff. Anyways, Jameson, Ty, anything we want to say before we leave?
No. Yeah, I guess topics, and I feel like we should also talk about the new NIL deal that OU put in place, like the Switzer Foundation. We could talk about that next week too.
Yeah. Yep. We have a whole off season to talk about the NIL collectives, what that means for the future, all that. Ty, any final thoughts?
No, I feel like I must. I don't know what it's called. What is it that they do in the Catholic Church? Like repentance or come clean. There was a time.
Confession.
I just remembered confession. There was a time in middle school where I was on a trip to California, and for some reason I was cold. I understand why I'm cold. I was cold. We're not going to dive into that. It had to do with the weather. But there was a time where I went to California, and then for like 2 whole days wore a Texas sweatshirt because I bought it in San Francisco because it was the only school I recognized, and I wore that. So
that's okay. You're forgiven. You're forgiven. Well, that's why you throw horns up all the time, because you have allegiance to that sweatshirt. That
says the guy that went to Austin for the spring game. Yeah.
You're also. Let me guess. That's a Kevin Durant jersey. Is it?
You better not be wearing a Kevin Durant
legally,
jersey.
According to the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution, I don't have to answer that, and I would like to specify that the Fifth Amendment exists not to protect the guilty, but to protect the innocent.
I mean, okay, fine. Sleeper agent Ty. I mean, I'm just saying it could be a thing. But yeah, no. So, anyways, all right, folks. Thank you all so much for listening. And if you're listening wherever you get your podcast, all that, make sure you give us a 5-star review. We would love that. And we'll be putting these out all throughout the off season. But if you like the visual element, check us out on YouTube. We do these live. We're trying to keep a schedule of going live on Sundays, so you can hang out, chat with us, etc. It's some good stuff. So subscribe to us on YouTube at the Schooner Pod. And if you know us from YouTube, vice versa, if you want to listen to us when you're driving to work or doing whatever, just look for us wherever you get your podcast. We're there. So yeah, all right. Thank you again for coming on, guys. It was always a pleasure. It's good times. So we're about to hit the real depths of the off season. I feel like I say that at the end of every pod, but
we keep getting content, baby.
Oh, we keep squeezing that lemon, baby. Let's keep it going. So, all right, that's our show. We'll see you next week, where we'll talk a little NIL and just whatever happens. But until then, have a great week, and Boomer Sooner.